So I have signed up for the Rusty Fish 100 on October 8th. This is my first long ride to try to prepare for this 100-mile race. And I never realized that I could ride from my house to this beautiful place. Look at this. This is amazing. I'm gonna eat some cheese and just enjoy this. I'm considering going on another Rusty Fish specific training ride today, but I'm just nervous about the distance. I'm looking at riding like 120 miles, and I don't know if I can do that. I'm gonna be gone for a while today, so here you go. About 67 miles in, a little over halfway. I don't know how I'm gonna do this. We're still going. It is about to get dark, as you can see. 87.5 miles in. Back at 60 whatever miles, when I was having a real hissy fit, I felt bad, and it was the first time that I felt that bad today. And about 15 minutes later, my body's like, all right, we felt this bad for this long. So it just adapts to it, and you just get familiar with it. And I think I'm gonna make it. 100 miles. We hit 100 miles. It's quite dark. There's a little bit of light back there. And I've never ridden in the dark, and I have got 20 more miles to go. 7 hours, 44 minutes, 118 miles later, we're home. So this ride was a pretty big deal for me. It's the longest ride in terms of time, as well as distance, that I've ever done. It's the day before the Rusty Fish, and I have taken the day off work. And when you have a day off work, you've got to maximize your time, so I'm going to the dentist, the optometrist, and then I'm going to head up to Manistee. It's about 3.5 hours away. I want to pre-ride part of the course, and then go pick up my packet tonight. That way I've got all my information, and I'm ready to go for tomorrow. Alright, it's the night before the race, and I've got some housekeeping to do. So earlier I went on a pre-ride, checked out the course, at least a bit of it. I mean, technically like a fifth of the course, which is pretty good, since it's an out and back. And I got in my own head a little bit, because the sand is soft, right? Sand is soft, and I'm running 40 millimeter tires. Oh boy, I don't think I have enough tire. It has changed my tactic, and it also has changed where I think I'm going to finish. So I'm going to say I'm shooting for top 10. All right, it's race morning, and I could not sleep past like 3:30. I was just laying there thinking about today. But I got some burritos here, and I got some coffee over here. So we're gonna hopefully get woken up and get ready. The 2022 Rusty Fish is finally here. I've been training for this event for a couple of months. This is my season finale, so I'd really like to end the season on a high note. Good result, good performance would really be nice here. This is 100 miles also, and I'm not entirely sure what to expect for course conditions. And I'll tell you, as the race gets underway here, my tires were fine. There was only a couple of sections of sand today, but I never actually had to put a foot down. I do unclip once, but not a big deal. A lot of other riders also were running anywhere from 37 to 45, a couple of fat bikes, a couple of mountain bikes, but all of those tire types were fine. There's also a middle distance if you wanted a little bit shorter day. They started at 10 versus us starting at 8. But I'll tell you, even if you're not showing up to try to race and you just want to go on a really beautiful ride, this is a great time of year to be in this part of Michigan. We're leaving up out of the Manistee area, and we're actually going to head north quite a bit and then come back. And as you'll see in this video, it is absolutely beautiful. Now to the racing. So quickly, I'm trying to find my way to the front, make sure that I don't miss any moves if they happen, because if the fast guys get away, right away, I'm going to be left fighting and chasing. It was windy today, It wasn't as windy in the morning as it will be in the afternoon, but it was pretty much windy all day. Now, I know two riders here in this group. The first rider was last year's winner, who we are behind right now, and the other rider is Jared Dunham. Now, I didn't know anything about Jared prior to the day before, the day of the race, because on my way up to this race, I listened to the Dirty Chain podcast, where they talked about how well Jared had done at Moran 166, and that obviously meant he was going to be a factor in this race today. Now, we'll see him in just a little bit. But for now, we're cruising along, 21 miles an hour, got a nice little pace line thing going on here. And we're going up this little kicker, which does have a Strava KOM segment, which meant that I was able to kind of look at how we had done, our people had ridden in the past. Not a big deal, doesn't break up the group. But it does put a little bit of fatigue into some legs, because as you can see, we have a little gap between the rider in front of me and the riders in front of him. Now, that's not the only gap on the road. There are two riders who had broken away a little bit earlier, who are even further up the road, but our group wasn't panicking. However, I was starting to panic, and I needed to close this gap down. We are about to turn onto the first gravel section of the day, and I did get to pre-ride this portion of the course the night before, so I sort of knew what was coming for the next 8 or 9 miles. So 4 riders come across with me, and this makes us a group of 8 with another 2 riders up in front of us. And I was concerned that on this gravel section, it would get a little crazy, because we'd be chasing down those 2 riders up in the front, and maybe this sandy gravel would be a challenge to ride on, especially in a group. But it was almost like riding on pavement. I mean, it's a little bit bumpier, but I had no issue whatsoever. Whereas the previous night when I pre-rode it, it felt a little loose. I don't know, maybe it's just because we're in a race setting and you just don't think about those things. But I felt pretty comfortable racing right on someone's wheel, also being on the front pulling. Actually, being on the front was probably better, because you could see your line and know that you were going to be all right wherever you stuck your wheel. Now, to give you a point of perspective for this race today, I was just on the front there doing a little over 240 watts, kind of up and down in that area, but my FTP, or my all-out power for 1 hour that I can produce, is about 238. So if I'm doing over that number, I'm working pretty hard. Now, some of these riders in this group are capable of a lot more than I am, so you're going to see them put out some pretty serious power and just see me try my best to match it. There's 2 riders finally coming back on this little kicker. We're going to bring them back into the fold, doing 390 watts here. And these riders in front, I mean, yeah, they're riding up this hill pretty quickly, but they don't even look like they're working that hard. And this concerned me, because I wasn't sure that I was in the right group. I'm feeling really strong, feeling really good, ready to ride hard for the day. But I wasn't totally sure I was on the same level as some of these other guys. Now, everyone kind of relaxes. I think that they know what's coming up. And what I'm referring to is Coon Road, which is a 2-track, which I'm sure can be pretty sandy. It wasn't too terribly bad today, but it does cause me to pull out a line, and I'm going to go to the back. The reason being is I want line choice, and I want to get through the sand at my own pace. Now, the rider in yellow, who just came past me, he's doing the exact same thing, but he's going to do it from the front, which is really smart in terms of race tactics, because if you're at the front, you also have line choice and you can set your own pace, and you're just better positioned, right? So I should have done that same thing, but I just wasn't feeling super confident. Hindsight's a beautiful thing, and after this race, I definitely feel more confident on different surfaces. So it's all a learning process, right? So we're about to make this right-hand corner, and you can see Jared's already going to have a gap on the rest of us. There's also a little gap between 3rd and 4th there, but I'm not too bothered with that. I am only concerned with staying upright on this 2-track, and I had even ridden it the night before, so I knew it wasn't that bad. This rider in front of me, you can see his tires are going to start to dig in a little bit, and my front tire does the exact same thing and throws me to the right into this really soft stuff. I have to unclip, and I'm having trouble getting clipped back in, and everyone's just riding away from me. I'm still not that disappointed, because I'm sort of thankful for the room to kind of move around freely, but in a race setting, I should have been more on top of it. So now that we've gotten through the worst of it, which wasn't that bad, I'm going to try to make up positions. So I do get past one rider, so I'm now in 9th position. And I'm going to come by another rider for 8th. And I see these 3 riders sort of in a group coming into this first hill on Coon Road. And I'm sort of happy with this position. If I end up getting over this hill with them, I'll have a group to work with. And that's not a bad thing, especially because it's pretty windy today. I've set it at a tempo that I can pretty much hold for a short-ish period of time. But right here is where I turned around the night before. I didn't know that we kept going up. And you can see it's a little sandy there on the side. I was in the left lane, which is a little bit more solid at that point. But we're going to continue riding up this hill. Unfortunately, I had been holding back a little bit because I had intended to have to catch up to those riders for a longer period of time. So I'm just getting through this, just staying upright, keeping the momentum and the cadence high. And I finally get to the top of this hill. And anything after this is a mystery. I didn't pre-ride even to this point. So anything down this hill, I have no idea what's coming. But what I see is another hill. Now, I knew from the previous year that one of the race organizers would probably be up here taking pictures, which meant that this hill was probably even more formidable than the previous one. And it is. It's a little steeper, a little sandier, but still rode the entire thing. Getting up to the top, I mean, to get through those 2 fast was a pretty decent effort. Now I've got a decision to make.
Do I sit up and wait, or do I push?
So basically, I needed to figure out if I wanted to try to solo and catch up to the next group on the road, wherever they were at. I couldn't see them at the time. Or do I sit up and wait for other riders? And you can see I sat up and I waited for this rider here. So 2 things. First, this is where the race gets really, really pretty. I mean, the sun starts coming through these trees, and just look at this. Just beautiful. Also, this is one of the riders who had been up the road earlier in the race, one of the 2. So I knew he was pretty strong, and I was very concerned that he would try to get rid of me. Especially because once he caught me, he pretty much did all the work. It was almost like I wasn't even there. I just stuck on his wheel, and he just kept on pushing, which, hey, for me, I'm happy with that. Eventually, I do end up on the front for a bit, and you can see I'm right in that sweet spot of the pull, right around my FTP. Not trying to go too crazy. And at this point, some other riders had finally caught up to us. So we are 4 strong, and our positions are 5th through 8th. So who we have here is we've got Tom in the front, we've got Jeff on second wheel in the blue GLS kit, we've got myself, and then the rider who I believe his name is Dan, I hope I'm not making a mistake with that, behind me. Now these 2 riders in the front here are just absolutely powerhouses. I also got some really good draft from them, but when I would pull, I was having to go higher wattage than I wanted to try to keep the same pace that we'd been doing when they were on the front, but I was doing my best. So we're going to skip forward to 26 miles. We're a quarter of the way done with the race, and it's basically been the 4 of us, and then also another GLS rider, Aaron, had joined us for a period of time to make 5 riders. He does lose us later on in the race, before the 50-mile mark. So for a while we had 5, and right here we're back to 4. And again, so beautiful. This is one of those races that I'll come back to year after year, even if I'm not planning to race it per se, just to ride it because it's so pretty. So we've made a big jump to mile 50. Another quarter of the race is under our belts. And we've lost Dan, the rider in the green, who had caught up to me first after the Coon Road Hills. He had stopped at the first aid station. The rest of us, the other 3, decided to push on to the 50-mile aid station at Ironfish Distillery. So I'm in and out as quick as possible. This is edited, so it wasn't this fast, but I basically pulled in, got water, and continued on. It's also worth mentioning there are 5 aid stations, I believe, on the course this year. So there was plenty of options. You could have gotten by with just 1 bottle. But I am running a hydration pack and 2 bottles. I think I enjoyed looking at the trees more while editing this video than I did during the race, because during the race I was focused on so many other things. You do notice it though. It's hard not to notice it. So we're still cooking along. And again, kudos to these guys for just doing so much work. I don't know what the ratio of work would have been, but they did way more. There you just saw that we actually had a chance to see some riders who were still coming in on the 100-mile course, give them some support. They gave us some support as well. I love that about this race. But here, what's going on, right? Tom's up the road. Where's Jeff? Well, he's actually just to my left, just behind me. We were starting to fade a little bit in terms of power. We're 67 miles into this race. We've been working hard all day. That's only natural to happen. I caught back up to Tom. But he was sort of soft pedaling as well, so I just kind of pushed on around 180, 190 watts. Not necessarily trying to get away or anything, but just trying to keep a decent enough pace to not be caught by anybody else. As we make this right-hand turn, we had just finished climbing a hill, which is the reason that Tom and Jeff had faded just a little bit off of my wheel. And another hill is facing us, and I'll tell you, this one sort of broke my spirit a little bit. And Tom did have a chance to catch up. In fact, after this hill, I'm only solo for like another half mile before Tom is back. Now, Jeff wasn't that far off of our wheels for a long time, but he never made the connection back, so we soldiered on. Now, looking back, I'm really thankful to have had Tom's help in this last section of the course, because it is windy. And also mentally, I was starting to suffer with nothing to focus on but just putting out power. So having the benefit of being able to focus on working together and having some draft help, super good, very helpful. I know plenty of people probably had to do a portion of this race solo, and that would have been very challenging. So now I'm starting to think about the finish of the race. If we work together, we're going to come into the finish together, and I'm going to have to race him, and I have no idea what he's capable of. I also don't really know how my legs are going to feel. In the races leading up to this one, I've typically cramped up and rolled in sort of defeated. But right now, still feeling good. And actually, the biggest thing on my mind is, since this is kind of an out and back course with a little loop at the end, I have to ride Coon Road again. And something that I hadn't thought of is that a bunch of other people had ridden Coon Road after us, so it's going to be a little choppy. It's okay. Right in the box, come on. Right in the box, come on. So if you're wondering why I was yelling at myself, basically I was completely tensing up because I was afraid to ride through the sand. And if I yelled at myself to be light on the bars, it loosened my grip, loosened my arms, and I was able to float through the sand instead of locking up and potentially catching a rut and crashing. Now, the sand was a little drier. The sun had been out. It had been kind of a nice day. It had rained the day before. So with the other riders coming through and a little bit drier, you can see that there's some ruts created in the sand, but I never have to unclip and put a foot down. I'm able to push on through this stuff, and that feels really good. I would say that if I had a 45mm tire, I don't think it would have made that big of a difference. I could be wrong, but it just doesn't seem like it would have helped me that much. If you can just make your way through it and get to the sections that aren't sandy, it might be worth running that skinnier tire like I did. We find ourselves at 96.9 miles. That means there's only like 4 miles of racing left to go. And this is where I start to think about how to beat Tom. So I'm starting to bring up the power. A steady 240 watts at 96 miles is really challenging. And my hope is if I can just keep the power high enough for long enough, that Tom won't be able to hold my wheel, but when I look back, he's right there. So on the next climb, and just like another half a mile later, I decide I'm going all in. This is going to be my attempt to break his spirit, get away from him, so I can secure the 5th place spot. So you're seeing me do over 300 watts, sustained with 97 miles worth of racing in my legs. I mean, this is a new personal best for me, to be at this distance doing this kind of power in a race setting, not being cramped up on the side of the road. I mean, this is a win in itself. And to be honest, Tom's played it really smart. He's been on my wheel, letting me set the pace, and when I look back, he's still right on my wheel. I was absolutely certain that I'd put a gap into him, so I have to bring the power down because I am totally gassed. We're not done with the hills. The last few miles have a couple of good little climbs, and this time Tom goes to the front. I'm thankful for that because I know we've got a sprint type of finish coming up, and I'm happy to just be behind him, let him set the pace. We're on the final stretch, less than a mile to go. I was really surprised that Tom took it upon himself to essentially lead me into this, but again, in all honesty, the wind is so crazy, I'm not getting that much benefit here. I know I'm getting some though. And with the power that I'm putting out, I know he's got to be doing just a ton of work here. I can tell he's accelerating. He's pushing hard. I'm doing 400 watts, which means he's got to be doing at least 5, maybe 600. We're getting so close to the finish, I've got to find some way to pass him. But I want to do it safely because this is on a pretty busy road, so I need to take that left side line when there's no traffic coming. So I'm kind of checking, make sure when I can do that. And now that we've crested that slight rise, it's downhill to the finish. I can only power up to 350 watts there to get around him. Now, if you would have asked me what power I did to get around him right there, I easily would have said 600, maybe more. But apparently that's all I had in my legs. Now, I thought I had a gap again. But as we come into the grass, on the final couple hundred meters, Tom is going to slide by me on this right-hand side when we come onto this walking path. There he goes. He takes this corner really aggressively, very impressive. And I pretty much knew that this locked in my 6th place finish. We come into the finish here. Tom crosses the line. I'm about 2 seconds back. And that was my Rusty Fish 100-mile race. So the post-race was almost better than the race. North Channel Brewing had brought the ability to cook pizza and serve beer. I got one of those, or a couple of those Rusty Fish IPAs. I got to hang out with the riders that I rode with in the day. Tom, Jeff, Aaron, Amy, I think. I hope that's right. I also got to talk to the riders who finished in front of me, including Zach and Alex, who used to live where I live now. Unfortunately, they've moved. And lastly, I got to talk to the guy who won the race, Jared Dunham. It was kind of like talking to a celebrity because I just heard about him on the Dirty Chain podcast. And then for him to go solo from that attack you saw at mile 13 for 87 miles to win this race, super impressive. I mean, just awesome. Super cool guy. So overall, awesome event. Perfect finale for the season. And hey, maybe we'll see you next year.